Hello, one and all. Welcome back to the lore and story of the Radical-9 saga. Last time we covered the events of the book Radical-9, and this time we're going to be tackling the end of the original trilogy with Dreamer. Let's just get right on into it, shall we? 2027. The Queen has decided that the United States has gone on long enough without order to rebuild from. It is at this point that a new president is placed into office. This person is Oliver Avery. Yes, the same Avery that raised and then sent Aria Avery to the States after her birth was discovered. Oliver Avery's placement is in this case twofold, both a punishment to him and a punishment to the struggling territory. During this point in time, Oliver Avery has an immense transportation project started to move the Statue of Liberty off to the Californian coasts, where he intends to establish a new foothold in the despot nation. We then pass 2 years since 2029. In February, 16-year-old John Ryan, now John Baker after being adopted, experiences vivid nightmares of an apocalyptic city where he's forced to flee with classmate Iris McCallum. Then meets up with a mysterious blonde girl who helps him escape, but then turns on him, shooting him as Iris watches. The name Sarah echoes as he wakes up in Queensbury, New York. John's waking life is bleak. His relationship with his adoptive father, Peter, is strained, worsened by Peter's drinking and temper. At school, John observes the oppressive political climate under President Avery's regime, enforced by strict security and authoritarian district officers. He struggles socially, avoiding conflict, and has a striking encounter with a girl named Sarah, who resembles the girl in his dream. Throughout the day, John reflects on dark topics that he sees in class, witnesses bullying towards Iris, and remains passive to avoid attention in total. At home, a brief reprieve ends with Peter attacking him over a minor mistake, leaving John emotionally shattered and retreating to his room for comfort and sleep. On the morning of the 24th, John wakes with a headache from his father's earlier violence and decides to visit the park for some relief. There he encounters Sarah again, the girl from his dreams and now school, who greets him warmly and they share a light, engaging conversation. Before leaving, Sarah forgets her sketchbook, which John finds contains drawings of him and a ruined city resembling that of his nightmares. As John walks through town, he notices ominous news alerts predicting an apocalypse, and at the boardwalk he discovers strange structures marked Micah before being engulfed in darkness and being transported back to the apocalyptic city from his dreams. Amidst the devastation, Sarah appears glowing with warmth, touching him with a mysterious light, and then disappears, leaving John silent and powerless. John wakes injured and disoriented, having lost a day and unsure about the strange connections between his dreams, Sarah, and looming disaster. His head wound mysteriously seems to have healed overnight, deepening the mystery. Finding a phone number in his pocket, John calls and it reaches Sarah, who arranges to meet him at the park. Here, they discuss their shared dreams of the desolate city and realize their experiences might be linked. Sarah then remembers that she had drawn John, dated before they'd met, which has settled them both. They then talk about a hacker named Micah spreading apocalyptic warnings and the cryptic date of March 18th, possibly being tied to their visions. Fearful of being disbelieved, or suspected in fact, they decide not to involve the police. Amidst the tension, John learns about Sarah's life caring for her paralyzed mother, who believes time heals all wounds. John opens up about his strange relationship with his own parents, especially his father. Sarah listens quietly, showing empathy without pressing. As their conversation draws to a close, they prepare to part ways, but Sarah unexpectedly hugs John from behind and softly says, "I'm sorry." As she walks away, he hears a voice in his mind. "I'm sorry he hits you," followed by another, more ominous warning. "Stay away from her." Despite the warning, John is determined to keep searching for answers. On his way home, he feels unsettled by strangers staring at him and begins to question how hard he hit his head. Back home, he finds his father passed out drunk. After making a simple meal, he briefly thinks he sees the masked man from his dream at the window, but no one's there. Disturbed and exhausted, he decides to nap, hoping to clear his mind. John then has a vivid dream that he's in a lush forest where he encounters the masked man again. This time he's wearing a white pinstripe suit. He hands John a note that says he wants to borrow him because someone named Reinhardt is interested, mentioning the March 18th date. The dream shifts violently as the forest bursts into flames, animals suffer, and the scene turns into chaos. John runs, but realizes he can't escape a dream. He wakes up in agony at 3 a.m., sweating and bleeding from the reopened head wound. His screams bring his father storming in, furious. Without compassion, his father throws a glass at him, hitting him in the head and worsening the injury. John tries to stay quiet to avoid more violence, but breaks down in pain and fear. As he fades into unconsciousness, overwhelmed by the suffering and the sensation of being dragged under, his final thought is of Sarah, desperately hoping for someone to save him. John then dreams of a mysterious scene. Two men, one with black hair and glowing green eyes, and the other with mismatched eyes. They discuss whether John is the one that they're looking for. Now, based on description alone, this is our first glimpse at Andrew Kress and Gavin Daniels, respectively, in this new story. And joining into the conversation is Lindsay Barrett. They're concerned that getting it wrong could get an innocent person in danger. And as the dream ends, John begins slipping into a distorted state. Sounds and images begin to blend together. His room, dark voids, ruined city, the burning forest. He hears screaming and then an explosion. Back in his room, shadowy figures move around him, and though he tries to run, he's paralyzed. Everything goes black. The story then shifts to Sarah's perspective on her first day at Queensberry High. She reflects on adjusting to a stricter routine, her mother's sacrifices, and her nervousness about seeing John again, the boy that she'd drawn before meeting. Sarah reveals she has a secret ability to hear stray thoughts, which lead to the disturbing dreams and a move from Denver. At school, Sarah encounters a cold receptionist and an unnerving guidance counselor. In English class, she meets Iris, who warns her about John and mentions rumors of abuse. Despite some tension, they bond while heading to art class, where Iris' straightforward but caring nature helps Sarah feel more at ease and accept her offer to sit together. We then shift back to John when he wakes up alone in the school gym, bloodied and with no memory of how he got there. He discovers his gym teacher's mutilated body, indicating a violent attack. He contacts Sarah, and realizing that Iris is with her, he learns that he's been missing for 2 weeks, though it only felt like a day to him. Sarah believes him, but Iris is suspicious. Returning to John's house, they find his parents' mutilated corpses, echoing the murder of the teacher. From this, they begin driving to begin talking about their options. While fleeing, Iris loses control of the car, which crashes. John rescues both girls despite a severe leg injury. A sinister voice tries to manipulate him, but he tries to resist. As police arrive, John fears being blamed for both murders. Detective Ace Hard arrests him harshly, ignoring Sarah and Iris, and John loses consciousness in the police car. He wakes, trapped in a dark void where a godlike figure named Reinhardt reveals that they're in the dreamscape. It is a mental realm showing possible futures, and he warns of the deadly catastrophe that is set to happen on the 18th. John vows to stop him, but then he wakes up. He's in the jail with a broken leg and accused of murdering his parents and his teacher. Sarah supports him and has arranged a lawyer, Andy Kress, who prepares John's defense. John recounts his strange, violent memories and prophetic dreams that he's been having involving Micah. Both John and Sarah share the abilities tied to their visions and dreams of disaster. Andy, who's encountered Reinhardt before as Jacket Data, suspects a connection between these events and past trauma. Andy then believes that John is the person that he and Gavin have been seeking for 7 years. With John's trial set for the next day, Andy plans to regroup afterward and decide their next steps. Sarah skips school to support John at the trial, despite her mother's worries, and meets Iris on the way to the courthouse. There, they face tension with Detective Hard, but reunite with Andy and his legal team, Lindsay, Gavin, and his sister Jen, who explain the harsher legal system under President Avery. The group is worried about the aggressive prosecution, especially since the prosecutor was once a friend of Jen's who was thought dead, Jake Carraway. Gavin, Andy, and Jen explain the origin of the Radical-9 virus, which began as scientists Jacket Data and secret government groups studying alien elements from Mars. An accident happened in 2008 which infected scientists and their children with the virus, enhancing their abilities, but causing severe psychological and physical health issues. Jack, infected first, gained telekinetic powers, became dangerous, and experimented on children in 3 infection waves, 2008, 2013, and 2014. Jen is Jack's daughter and the sole survivor of the 2013 tests. Sarah and John are believed to be the survivors of the 2014 wave. Each infected person has unique powers, and the group is working to stop Jack's catastrophic plan set for March 18th. Sarah and Iris are initially skeptical, but come to believe the story. Jen expresses concern about Jake, a powerful prosecutor with dark past connected to the police scandal with his father. Andy and Jen head into court, where tensions rise as Jake insults them before the trial even begins. John pleads not guilty to 3 charges of first-degree murder, and Jake delivers a fierce opening statement portraying John as a blood-covered killer, before memories of Andy's past begin to flood his vision.
Now, don't laugh, okay? I'm holding the papers in front of my face, just under my view of Lindsay. She's sitting in the love seat in the family room of our small apartment just outside Clifton Park. 5 years ago. This was after we found a spot to settle in New York. Jay helped us find the place. He helped a lot, actually. We all needed help after what we've been through. I'm not gonna laugh at you, Lindsay says, holding a cup of coffee in between her hands. I really think you got it this time. Try it once more. I can feel the nervous shake in my hands. I try to breathe deep. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, I ask not much for you to consider your best judgment in the case that follows. I believe in your decision, just like I believe in my client's innocence. I will do my best to show you the truth. I look up to her, waiting for her opinion. She sits there a moment in silence, sipping her coffee. Well, I ask. If you need to ask. Then I failed, I say, slumping, letting the paper fall to my side. You're too worried about reading everything off the sheet perfectly. It makes you look uncertain. Uncertain? If you want to convince people, you're going to have to get to their heart. You have to urge them with your soul. I look at her and I let the papers fall from my fist. Ladies and gentlemen of the court.
In the courtroom, both sides are presenting opening statements. Prosecutor Jake portrays John as the murderer, citing forensic evidence like a bloody revolver and blood on John's clothes. Detective Hart testifies about finding the weapon and shows signs of nervousness, which Andy can pick up on and challenges. John testifies he has no memory the last 2 weeks and has been kidnapped, waking up alone in blood with no weapon. Andy introduces evidence to support this, including a threatening note signed by Micah and a missing persons report, filed by his mother. Andy calls Jen to test a blood sample on the note, discovering 2 blood types, John's mother's and, surprisingly, Detective Hart's. This revelation shakes the courtroom, casting doubt on the prosecution's case. Jake then accuses Andy of fabricating evidence, but Andy counters by requesting handwriting analysis linking the note to a Picasso painting tied to a Micah forgery, leading to a recess. From the stands, Gavin reflects on his close friendship with Andy, admiring Andy's perseverance through personal loss and their shared mission to find John. Gavin also reveals he's an automaton, a secret only known to a few trusted friends. During the court recess, Gavin reconnects with Iris and the group, who remain hopeful about their case despite the mounting challenges. Andy is confident the key evidence will soon resolve the trial. They discuss John's unexplained rapid healing from the serious injuries, speculating advanced technology, or maybe even a healing factor like Jack's radiation-induced regeneration might be involved. Gavin then shares his experience traveling to a dystopian future in 2060 within the Apocalypse timeline, where humanity nearly went extinct after people infected with the Radical-9 virus caused nuclear-level explosions upon death. The first such event occurred in 2029, leading to civilization's collapse by 2042. He reveals that Micah, current dangerous figure, is an alternate corrupted version of himself from that future. As the trial resumes, Jen's testimony confirms the key evidence matches Micah's handwriting, supporting John's defense. Prosecutor Jake Carraway reacts angrily, raising the judge's concern. Suddenly, the lights go out, and Micah interrupts via a megaphone, revealing he had forged the evidence to ensure John's conviction, which Jake had failed to do. Micah takes matters into his own hands, and when the lights return, the bailiff is found brutally murdered, proving Micah's presence. Chaos ensues as the judge recognizes the forged evidence and Jake's misconduct, acknowledging John's innocence. Jake flees, and then Jen volunteers to pursue him to figure out what's going on with him. Andy, Gavin, and the others rush to find and protect John, who is now in serious danger. They plan to contact Jay for help, while Jen chases Jake, ending with a tense effort to reach John quickly. Next comes an interstitial message from the creator. The POV is listed as Z1.
Chapter None, July 28, 2018. Z1. Well, it seems it's been quite some time since we've spoken. In the original version of this novel, there was a section at this exact point in the story that had a page of Morse code. That same code looked like as follows. This message is one of many I've left scattered around for you to find. It is a calling, a warning of an inevitable fate that I have attempted to avoid for as long as I have known of its existence. There are only 2 points, 0 and 1. Between them lies our lives, and we're approaching 1. The end is coming close. A tragic Chapter None. Time untold. Bone casket. A tearing sound rips through like dull shears through fabric. A flash of light. Immediate pain behind the eyes of the body standing before the rift. A ringing alarm from a machine in the back corner of the room. A body slumped against the evocation unit. It had been a close call. Just a little further and it would have seen the... "Are you going to make me dispose of it this time?" A voice tinged with irritation called from the side. "Just lump it over the edge," the first had responded. "Can't be heavier than the last few we've seen. I'm busy with this one." The second had come closer, peering over the void as if it were crawling with insects inside. "Find anything of use yet? Or are you going to keep tearing through it like a child with scissors?" "I'm inspecting, learning. It's not every day you get something like a down here. It's just marvelous." The second let out a sigh of acceptance. It was clear the first had no intention of helping with the next faller's transition. The second had gotten used to it ever since the had appeared. It was the first new variance in over 10,000 years. The second couldn't blame the first for taking an interest in investigating it. They had just wished that the first were a bit more even in splitting responsibilities. Not much new came to the bone casket. You filtered through what came up from above, and you sent it on its way down below. Like tears from a withering face to a despondent loved one, everything flowed down. "Wait, come here a moment. I think I might have made a connection," the first had said, sudden intrigue filling the room. The second's curiosity had been piqued. "Here, through this bit," the first had sat back, holding a bloodied scalpel and some forceps, the latter of which had held back a blackened chunk of what looked like flesh, although the way the darkness on it seemed to swirl had utterly confused the second. "Don't mind that part, and don't touch it," the first had scolded as they slapped the second's hand away. "It's sure to get you into something you'd best regret. Look, when I sift this part of the side like this," the first had demonstrated, and the view of the rift that sat right above the had begun to shift. It showed a group of people, dressed stranger than any of either the first or second had seen, gathering in what looked like an iron demon. This must be a view from above. Their magic was always so strange. "What do you think they're doing, getting into that box like that?" "Oh, I see, it propels itself." "Just like that," the first mused. "Just like that," the second agreed. "Why don't you try prodding it at it a bit more? See what else we can see." "Think that messes of the when," the first says. "The blonde fellow looks familiar. Think I saw him before. Let's see." The first carefully peels back a layer of the flesh, now seeming to hum with a dark fervor as the scalpel makes its cut, dark fluid spilling out onto the table and drips to the floor. "The blood bad to touch?" the second asks. "Doesn't seem so. Wouldn't recommend it anyway." "Interesting. I need to prod at it a bit. Mind getting our newbie down below and I'll call you when I get a clear signal?" The second one groaned. "Fine." The second heaved the body over their shoulder and moved past the evocation unit. Close. Too close. Ever since the third's accident, they've gotten sloppy. They couldn't risk any more mistakes, especially when they'd nearly come so close. The second shuddered at the thought, the sound that it made when it appeared. The first was lucky we were in the casket. If they had been caught unawares when the appeared, they would be 2 down. What would the second do then? The unseemly pair made it to the transfer unit. The faller had been a man, didn't look too off, no visible wounds, no immediate story of how he ended up here. The second opened up the second pair of eyes and scanned behind the man's retinas. Ryan Geever. Not too odd yet, and something about this seems wrong. The second looked to the man over once more, and then from behind. "Hey, you're going to want to see this," came the first. Without another thought, the second hooked up the man, dual-ended prongs through the eye sockets like all the rest, and turned the machine on. Down you go. The second turned to join the first in the other room. What is it? As soon as he entered, a second, larger rift had opened up behind the first. It looked different, like it was torn from space itself by dark claws, and from it was a monstrous hand around the first's throat.
Huh? What was that? That was weird. Anyway, we're gonna move on after the events of the trial. John wakes shackled in a dark cell, confused and taunted by Micah, who hints at larger plans involving Reinhardt and humanity's fate. John learns he has regenerative powers and a mental link to Reinhardt. Suddenly, John is strapped in a white room and confronted by President Oliver Avery, who reveals an alliance with Micah and supports a catastrophic cleansing of humanity. John rejects this, mocking Avery's blind faith, but is forcibly injected as Avery signals the next stage of Reinhardt's plan. Meanwhile, Sarah and her group, Andy, Gavin, Lindsay, and Iris, prepare to find John to prevent the apocalypse. During their drive to the warehouse safe house, they share personal stories, confront tensions caused by the Radical-9 virus, and reaffirm their commitment to supporting each other despite the virus's impact. Back to John's POV, he's transported to a stark, another white room, bound and in pain, facing a man named Barry Rainwater in a lab coat. Now, Barry here is a familiar face to us in the global history, as we heard about him both in Telos and in A New Dawn. In A New Dawn, Barry was in the army alongside Mason Radica and Larry George as they underwent Operation Just Cause, and in Telos, Gavin sees that Barry has joined up with the Prometheans on the East Coast branch along with Mason Radica and his own parents. Barry reveals that Reinhardt is an extremely dangerous force and follows orders to weaken John with electric shocks. However, Barry eventually rebels, destroying the control device, and tries to help John escape. Their attempt is cut short when Micah, a brutal enforcer with a face resembling Gavin's but mutated by Radical-9, kills Barry violently and captures John, declaring he will take him to meet the half-man of the hour. Gavin and the group meet Jay at their warehouse, learning that John was likely taken to California by Micah. Jay has developed a radiation weapon to counter the Radical-9. As they plan the trip, Gavin offers to jump ahead to use his powers to save a seat in the car, and Iris insists on joining, even volunteering to be infected with Radical-9 to help. Despite concerns about Gavin's mindset, they proceed. Gavin and Iris successfully enter the dimension between dimensions and arrive physically in San Francisco. Surprising Gavin since his past jumps had only transferred his mind and not his body. Gavin reveals his current body is synthetic, preserved after his original had died from a Radical-9 explosion. Iris calmly accepts this and wants to stay a bit to find some meaning before returning. John encounters Reinhardt, who shows him a grotesque, decayed alien-like figure trapped in a machine inside the Statue of Liberty. The figure telepathically communicates, wanting John's help to become more. John refuses, horrified, but Reinhardt threatens to use Sarah to forcibly implant something into John's chest before sending him back to Micah, leaving him overwhelmed and barely conscious. Meanwhile, Sarah and the group reflect on sacrifice and the uncertainty about the cost of saving John. After Gavin and Iris leave, Sarah, Andy, Jay, and Lindsay travel to the Continental Inn, where Jay shares a personal story about his late wife and a special watch, similar to the one that John wears, that could help track John's location. The group sees this as a crucial lead, but knows they must rest before creating the tracking device and the weapon to stop the Radical-9, while Lindsay quietly copes with her anxiety through the night. Back to John's POV. John endures painful electrical torture under Micah's control, then loses consciousness and awakens in a dreamlike forest, this being the memory of Elysium's second floor. There, he reunites with Sarah, who explains they're both dreaming. They explore the eerie forest, encountering a statue of the defeated Chimera boss from that floor, and enter a dark cave illuminated by glowing bats. Sharing a close moment, they confess their feelings and kiss. Exiting the cave, John steps on a mysterious metal plate and is teleported to a dim chamber with a glowing door, embedded with 7 colored crystals, identified by Sarah as Magatama, Japanese historical artifacts that acted as keystones needed to escape Elysium in its time. John opens the door, but darkness and glowing eyes emerge from inside. Now, this is interesting because in the original run of Elysium through Radical-9, this door was never opened, as Jay's interference was what got the group to be out of the game. As Sarah enters, she is suddenly attacked and brutally killed by Micah in his beast form, leaving John frozen in shock, haunted by her screams. John suddenly wakes in the stark white room, confronted by Micah, who mocks him, and reveals that the entire dream with Sarah was a fabricated illusion designed to break him emotionally. Micah taunts John about his loss and drags him to the larger room with mysterious cramped machine. Despite John's resistance, Micah forces him inside. As it powers up, John's vision fades and he loses consciousness once more, with Reinhardt's voice ominously declaring, "We shall be as one." Going back to Sarah's POV, we actually see what she was really dreaming about. It reveals Lindsay's traumatic past as she syncs up with her psyche. She endured abuse from her father alongside her older brother Aaron, and after a significantly violent confrontation, the siblings flee and struggle to survive in a motel, burdened by financial troubles. Aaron becomes trapped in the virtual reality video game called Elysium, unable to log out due to a failsafe in the helmet that he wore. Determined to save him, Lindsay stole a helmet from the tech company Technodrome, and then they both ended up trapped together inside the game. Her dream shifts as she divorces herself from Lindsay's psyche. She then sees herself at home, arguing with her mother about wearing the coat. She then sees the moment play out from outside herself, realizing in hindsight how final and important it was. After she leaves, her mind quietly breaks down, struggling with something she feels she cannot do, but cannot yet face. Sarah, still dreaming, approaches her mother's laptop and logs in using her own birthday. She finds an old browser window open to a biography of a man named Friedrich Adada, a German scientist involved in the secret genetic experiments in the mid-20th century. 9 out of 10 human test subjects died. The sole survivor, Sonia von Kleist, later married Adada. After the truth was exposed through recovered diaries, Adada was convicted and executed. Sonia had vanished. The two had one child, Jack Adada. As Sarah finishes reading, the dream turns surreal. The laptop emits a blinding white light that distorts her surroundings. Unable and unwilling to resist, Sarah steps toward it. As the dream intensifies, she sees the silhouette of a man, Friedrich Adada himself. We're going to put a pin in this thread as we shift over to Gavin and Iris. Their plan is to try to cross large distances to reach a place called the Acheron, which was previously known as the Salton Sea, as Iris had mentioned that Jack so far seems to have a habit to name things after Greek mythology. After jumping, Gavin finds Iris unconscious underwater and rescues her with CPR. They share a tender moment, acknowledging their feelings before continuing the journey. Near a beach city, they meet a stranger named Kevin, who offers them a ride. Dinner and a place to stay in exchange for helping him with the cover story with his partner Tammy. Now back with Sarah, she comes face to face with her grandfather. His recollection is set in a ravaged, desolate Weimar. Friedrich recounts how he left Germany before the war for research, returned after, and began experimenting on the 9th chromosome, which he claims holds transformative potential. He discovered it reacts intensely with mysterious materials from a secret space expedition conducted before the public space race. Now, we've covered Friedrich's experiments back in part 1, and just how depraved he is. But in the global storytelling, this is when this information is first revealed. It is important to remember that Sonia von Kleist is also the first automaton created, the knowledge of which would carry through the timeline and end up in Micah's hands in the desolate 2060. As Sarah awakens from the dream, Jay, who has had a similar dream, bursts into the room, confirming that something serious is beginning and urges them to get moving. While Jay gathers the group, Sarah searches the kitchen for food, finding canned goods and a can opener. She collides with Andy, who helps carry the supplies and sends her to find Lindsay. Sarah finds Lindsay's door locked and no response coming from inside. Jay arrives and tries unsuccessfully to break the door down. Andy eventually opens it, and they discover Lindsay unresponsive in the bathroom, an empty pill bottle in her hand. Andy checks her pulse and confirms that she is dead. The truth of the situation is that Lindsay has been battling demons over the past 7 years, and while we would all like to think that time heals all wounds, it seems Sarah had slipped into Lindsay's psyche so easily because an emotional relapse was inevitable. I have to pause the story recap here for a moment before we talk about Andy's reaction to all this. This was a harrowing point of the writing process. A character death is something that is always going to emotionally resonate with any writer worth their salt, so too the intent is to have the death resonate with the reader as well. And sometimes I think there's a disconnect where people think that death in fiction is a cheap way to get people to connect, and that if the writer really wanted to, they could just save the character, so why should I care? My feelings on this are difficult. I subscribe to the idea of a character living past the writer's intent, and while, yes, I technically, as the author, have the ability to write a story in which said character does not die, I feel like if it doesn't feel right, it'll show. It'll show in the characters' interactions moving forward, any developments they have. It all feels forced, and I just cannot and could not back in 2014 see Lindsay's future as anything other than what happens. It's far from the first character that has died in my stories, even this early in my career, I mean, Arya Avery's pretty notable death in Radical-9, Samuel Adada, Beth, the idea of Klein, Guile as a character, plenty of unnamed players, Telos as Gavin's parent, Megan Adada as Jack's whole crux into his insanity. Yet it was Lindsay who hit me the hardest. This was someone who had put in the work, put in the time, and was able to find ways to cope with her situation and her past. In previous edits of Dreamer, I think this conflict was a little looser in how hers and Andy's relationship formed. The new edit of them not immediately getting together post Radical-9, but instead working on healing together and a relationship forming naturally from their feelings toward one another, that feels a lot more true to the both of them. Unfortunately, though, suicide is a reality that has been hanging on the edge of her vision for a very long time. Especially immediately after the events of Radical-9. Lindsay is not doing okay. I chose not to depict these events as I think she deserves the privacy of dealing with that outside of the public eye on the page. Unfortunately, given the scope of the challenge that everybody is facing here, the tension she's had with Gavin over how Radical-9 as a virus can inhabit one's life, to finally having her most traumatic memories resurface, and perhaps even be enhanced by Sarah's viewing, it becomes too much. It's hysteria, it's panic, it's love, it's fear. And if anything had shifted in a different place, I believe Andy would have been able to catch on to her state earlier and taken time to separate from the group and regroup with her personally. It's not any one person's fault at what has happened to Lindsay. It is awful. It is tragic, and the feelings of grief that spring from this incident are going to resonate throughout the world for a time to come. Andy is devastated by the loss of Lindsay, someone he deeply loved and depended on. He struggles to process her sudden death, unable to believe she wouldn't have confided in him if something were wrong. Overwhelmed by grief, Andy is pulled away from her body by Jay and Sarah, but his emotions explode uncontrollably. In a surge of anguish, he accidentally throws Jay back with psychic force, killing him. Horrified, he breaks down even further, consumed by guilt and regret. Sarah comforts him, sharing that she believes Lindsay had been reliving her past traumas and her suicide may have been driven by long-standing emotional scars. Andy realizes he didn't fully grasp how much pain Lindsay carried and blames himself for not being more supportive. He returns to Lindsay's body, grieving and apologizing, acknowledging their shared brokenness and the love they tried to build despite it. He ends in tears. Andy and Sarah quietly bury Lindsay, with Sarah handling most of the work with Jay. Andy reflects on her strength, despite her young age and the grief she's endured. He resolves to not fall apart, honoring Lindsay by staying strong and continuing the progress they've made together. Sarah finds the transmitter Jay had finished before his death, and they both acknowledge the losses that they've suffered. Andy thanks Sarah for her resilience, and they agree to press forward, determined to rescue John, who was still alive. As they prepare to leave, Sarah offers to drive, saying she'll mourn later, after they completed their mission. Andy shares that Jay left a gun in the glove box in case something happens again. They set off together in the ZX Hybrid, focused and committed, knowing the road ahead is uncertain, but feeling united in their purpose. There's no turning back. Shifting onto lighter tidings, Gavin and Iris arrive at Kevin's apartment where they meet his partner Tammy. After a bit of playful banter and initial skepticism, Tammy agrees to let them stay for dinner and offers clothes and help him clean them up. Kevin leaves to fix his car's muffler, and Gavin reflects on the kindness of the couple and the peace they represent, what he and Iris are fighting for. As Iris gets changed and made up with Tammy's help, Gavin changes clothes and finds a moment of quiet reflection about their bond and the fragile peace they've found, however temporary. When Iris appears, Gavin is stunned by her appearance and expresses his affection, leading to an intimate and heartfelt exchange between them. They talk about their pasts, preferences, and favorite movies, growing even closer. The conversation ends with a call to dinner, and the two head to the kitchen with warmth and hope. Back to Sarah and Andy, they continue their cross-country drive to California, now in Wyoming with about 1,100 miles left to reach John. Running low on money and energy, they decide to stop in Laramie to rest. Despite Andy's initial hesitation, Sarah insists they're too exhausted and hungry to continue safely. They ask a local woman for directions and are pointed to the Calgary Hotel. As they drive through the quiet town, they reflect on how different it feels compared to the devastation that they've seen elsewhere. Andy uses his ability to retrieve a child's kite from a tree without physically touching it. He tries to explain how it works. It's not like magic or the Force from Star Wars, but more like manipulating particles around him. Sarah doesn't fully understand, but she listens. They arrive at the Calgary Hotel, joking about the car and their situation, and finally begin to settle in. Sarah and Andy unload their canned food into suitcases and bring them into the Calgary, preparing in case they need to live quickly without their car. On the way in, they notice a memorial to Matthew Shepard, which sparks a conversation about prejudice and empathy for victims and their families. Inside the hotel, they're greeted by an overly enthusiastic man named Inigo Campione IV, who boasts about his ancestry. Sarah, unimpressed, gives him a fake name, Agnes, to shut down his flirtation. They then speak to the receptionist, Terry, and secure a room for $60, cheaper than expected. Sarah and Andy head toward the elevator, planning to eat soon. On the ride out, they endure judgmental looks from two strangers, silently noting how little others truly understand about their situation. Back over with Gavin and Iris, they're sharing a dinner with Tammy that's interrupted by a distant loud crash, which Tammy dismisses as construction. Tammy accidentally cuts herself while serving the pork roast, quickly excusing herself. Gavin and Iris finish the meal and talk, with Iris revealing she once wanted to be a superhero. As the night progresses, their conversation turns more intimate, and after Kevin returns home briefly, Gavin and Iris return to the living room, where they share a romantic and sexual encounter. At the point of intimacy, Gavin experiences a familiar, ominous sensation, a pounding in his head signaling the onset of a vision. He sees a vast army of human-like automatons on the Sustanio 10, which was the lunar base that he was on in the Apocalypse timeline. Among the automatons happens to be Kevin and Tammy. Micah opens a rift through time and sends the automatons to the present day, and Gavin realizes that this vision had come from the past. Well, the future past. Later, through Tammy's eyes, Gavin sees that she is bleeding white when she cut herself, hinting closer to her automaton nature. He also sees the destroyed Statue of Liberty and Jod amidst the ruins. Snapping back to reality, Gavin finds himself in the apartment with Iris. Alarmed, he insists they leave immediately, but Kevin and Tammy begin to attack them. Gavin uses newfound powers to absorb electricity and generate plasma, killing both of them. He and Iris flee the collapsing building, pursued by more automatons emerging from nearby apartments. As they run hand in hand, Gavin compares the cast to a horror movie. They attempt to escape through the collapsing building but fall through the crumbling floors. Injured and disoriented, they make it to the first floor and flee outside, only to find themselves surrounded by hundreds of blank-faced automatons. More pour out of the building, including a twitching Kevin and Tammy, confirming they're still actually alive despite their injuries. Gavin tries to teleport them away, but he can't due to a head injury he's taken. As they prepare to flee, Micah appears, taunting Gavin. Micah mocks their situation, declares intent to watch them be torn apart, and then commands the automatons to attack. Gavin takes Iris' hand, bracing for the fight with only one thought in his mind: help! Back with Sarah and Andy, she wakes up from a disturbing dream in which John is being taken by Micah while calling for her help. Shaken, she prepares to leave a hotel with Andy around 2 a.m., gathering their remaining food supplies. During their exit, they're interrupted by Inigo, who persists in flirting with Sarah despite her repeated rejections. She finally lashes out at him, firmly making it clear she's not interested. Outside, Sarah vents to Andy about how unfair everything feels. How John, Lindsay, Jay, Karen, and all the others were dragged into chaos they didn't deserve. Andy reassures her that their connections helped them endure the hardship. They get into the car and speed off toward California to find John, now only 542 miles away. As they travel, Sarah falls asleep and enters the dreamscape. There, she finds Jay staring at a portrait of his late wife, Karen. Jay tells her that he cannot be with Karen yet because he's still atoning for the damage caused by his creation of the Radical-9, hinting that his presence in this space is sort of part of that penance. Jay explains to Sarah that dreamers, those infected with the Radical-9, are connected even after death, allowing him to visit her in his dreams. He reveals that Jack had taken over John's body, and killing Jack may mean killing John as well. John was forcibly exposed to massive amounts of Radical-9, making his body compatible for Jack's takeover. Unfortunately, that exposure also means that his body is now decaying. Jay warns that Jack's plan is to use John only temporarily before finding a new host, and on the 18th, Radical-9 will be released to the public en masse, creating millions of potential hosts for Jack to inhabit. Jay urges Sarah to kill Jack and free John before it is too late. Sarah wakes up in the car with Andy, now only 50 miles from John's location. As they drive into San Diego, they encounter a massive crowd of seemingly mindless people wielding weapons. One holds a 2x4 with nails puncturing into his hands, leaking white fluid. Andy realizes this must be part of Jack's army. Suddenly, a booming voice commands the crowd to attack, catching us back up where we left Gavin and Iris. Sarah and Andy hear a mysterious voice that didn't speak, realizing it was Gavin's. Through the crowd, they spot both of them, injured but alive, along with Micah nearby. To rescue them, Andy drives the car directly into the crowd of automatons, reminding Sarah that they're not real people. Still doesn't make it feel any better. The car slams through the crowd, and just before hitting Micah, he vanishes into thin air. Andy brings the car to a stop near Gavin, and Iris is the automaton's charge. Sarah opens the door and they jump in, narrowly escaping. Gavin even slams the door on one trying to follow. As Andy speeds through more automatons, one lands on the roof and begins banging to get in. Inside, they check Gavin's head wound. Bad, but treatable. Iris asks about Jay and Lindsay, and with a heavy breath, Andy quietly reveals the devastating truth. Both are dead. After learning of both deaths, Gavin is overwhelmed, but the group pushes forward, following a signal from John's watch, leading them to the destroyed Statue of Liberty. Gavin reveals he had seen it in a vision, confirming it as their destination. Sarah then shares a warning. Jay had told her in a dream that Jack had taken over John's body, and the only way to stop it was to kill John. As they near the statue, Micah suddenly reappears in front of their car. When they hit him, the vehicle crumples like tinfoil. Everyone inside is injured, but still alive, thankfully. The automaton horde is catching up fast. Then, Micah transforms into his monstrous wolf-like form, warping reality and pinning the group down with his unnatural presence. Micah grabs Iris and threatens to kill her. Gavin, though weakened, manages to tackle him and free her, but he's severely wounded. As Micah prepares to finish Gavin off, Andy uses telepathy to lift Micah off of Gavin. He bleeds a strange glowing liquid, and it's clear the group must defeat Micah before they can continue. Sarah regains movement thanks to Andy's telekinesis, and while Iris helps the injured Gavin, Sarah rushes back to the car to grab the pistol. Despite all the uncertainty, she takes aim and shoots Micah in the chest. The gunshot causes him pain and sends everyone flying from the shockwave. Though weakened and surrounded by all the strange energy, Micah stands taller and more menacing, locking eyes with Sarah before charging straight at her. Gavin, weakened by an overload of Radical-9 that'll soon kill him, realizes he must stop Micah to save everyone else. Despite knowing this will be his end, he urges Iris to use the gun to defeat Jack. After a gunshot weakens Micah once more, Gavin harnesses the city's electricity to attack him. They clash fiercely, and Gavin jumps with both of them, tangling themselves in the dimension between dimensions, locked in a deadly struggle.
Suddenly, there's a dark feeling in my gut. A voice echoes through my brain as time begins to slow to a halt. The repeated lyrics of a song push on the edge of my mind. Something is wrong. It's not the way it should be. But I don't know that. But I do. Micah pushes my arms back, his face feral, and he gnashes his teeth in a wicked snarl. He forms a subtle smile. He knows things are different. But how? He reels back and brings his arm down, his claw piercing right through my abdomen. The force doubles me over in his arm. The blood substitute rushes up my throat and I cough once. The pain is sharp, but then the feeling shifts to his claws inside me. He extends his hand as wide as he can before gripping tightly. I just feel his hand there, as if it were meant to be in this exact spot since the day it was formed. We sit in a sort of silence, him staring at me and I at him, until he breaks it finally.
It seems that you lose.
Hero. My hero. I see Megan in my mind's eye. All those years ago she told me that I was her hero. Back then, I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. I couldn't believe that I could be worth anything to anybody. Maybe some other me knew what it meant to live up to those expectations.
Now that I have you here, I'm going to devour you whole. Your power is mine. Everything you care about will be taken and thrown away.
There's a vibrating hum in my chest as my tongue begins to taste of copper. A vivid pulse shakes through my core. The electricity numbs my body as my eyes watch helplessly as darkness fills his.
Regret fills your body. It inhabits you wide. And now I shall inhabit all that you are. And together we shall follow this new path outside of our own space. We will follow our reverie.
I feel it in my veins. It's not going away. Everything's about to.
Shifting back to Sarah's POV in this timeline, Sarah watches Gavin sacrifice himself to stop Micah, leaving Iris devastated. Andy continues fighting the approaching automatons until reinforcements arrive in a police van, led by Jen and Jake. Here, Jake explains his troubled past, how he was kept alive with the experimental drugs after being shot in Radical-9, manipulated by Micah, and being used as a pawn in the legal system. After a personal crisis, Jen convinced him to help the group. With weapons loaded in the stolen police van, they now flee the chaos. As the group processes Gavin's death, Sarah comforts Andy and Iris while Jake confirms they've escaped the automatons. Jen rejoins them and begins to console Andy, affirming Gavin's admiration for him. She then reveals to Sarah that they are actually half-sisters, sharing the same father. Overwhelmed, Sarah finds comfort in her newfound family, including Iris, as they all embrace. Jake interrupts their emotional moment to announce their arrival at their destination, a narrow, eerie stretch of land leading to where Jack is located. As they approach, the group prepares mentally for the difficult task ahead, confronting Jack and possibly ending his torment. John sits alone in darkness, trapped in his subconscious, until a spark of light appears, revealing Jay's spirit. Initially skeptical and angry, John soon learns his truth. His adopted parents weren't his real ones, and the man before him, his real father, regrets in abandoning him. Though dead, Jay reveals he can communicate through their altered DNA and begins to offer emotional support and encouragement. He tells John that Gavin had died killing Micah, and that Sarah and the others are on their way to stop Jack. Though unable to affect the physical world, John's father offers to strengthen his willpower, giving him the hope he needs to fight back. As the group approaches the center of the peninsula, now called the Acheron, they prepare to confront Jack. Their van is destroyed by his telekinetic powers, forcing them to flee. When Andy tries to charge Jack, he hits an invisible barrier that only Jack's blood can cross. He taunts them, revealing Sarah and Jen, his daughters, are the only ones who can reach him directly. Sarah and Jen enter the circle to face him. Sarah fires a shot back at Jack, but stops the bullet in midair. He taunts them while using John's body and voice. Jen tries to fight back, but is thrown and nearly choked. Sarah fires again, but Jack catches the bullet. He takes Sarah's gun and prepares to shoot her, but the debris from the destroyed van crashes between them, allowing Andy to break through the weakened barrier with the makeshift weapon. Sarah's arms herself again, she joins the fight. Jen, badly hurt but determined, fires another revolver and hits Jack. Despite the pain, he only laughs, showing no sign of defeat. As Jack begins to heal himself, attacks from all three prove useless. Jack overpowers Andy and Jen, lifting them into the air while taunting them. He confronts Sarah alone, preparing to kill her, but suddenly he begins to hesitate. In that moment, John's voice breaks through Jack's control. He urges Sarah to continue her art, and speaks with clarity and deep emotion, struggling against Jack's domination. In a final act of resistance, John regains partial control and turns the gun on himself. Jack tries to resist, but John pulls the trigger, loading the bullet with Radical-9 energy. John's body begins to explode from the Radical-9 inside him, but he manages to contain the blast, ultimately transforming into a swirling and multicolored sphere of energy. The battlefield falls into an eerie silence. In the aftermath of John's self-sacrifice, the group processes their grief and the immense destruction left behind. Sarah is devastated, mourning over the pulsating sphere that remains of John, while Andy believes it is a condensed form of the Radical-9 explosion, contained by John's will. They agree that destroying it could unleash catastrophic energy, so it must be protected. As they comfort one another and reflect on their losses, John, Jay, Gavin, and Lindsay, they realize the fight isn't entirely over. President Airy has been found dead in the rubble, revealing the deeper thread behind the conflict. Sarah reveals a disturbing dream about her grandfather's Radical-9 experiments after World War II, including the surviving subject, Sonia Van Kleist, who may have fled to England and has risen to power. They conclude that England may have orchestrated and supported the crisis, and Sonia could be a key figure at large. While they are few and wounded, Sarah insists they must rebuild the country and eventually confront this hidden threat. Andy agrees. What's needed now is revolution. Andy and the group reflect on what comes next after their victory. Andy calls for unity, truth, and hope, believing they can be the spark for change. Encouraged, the group begins discussing forming a movement to rebuild the country. Iris jokingly suggests that Andy become the president, though hesitant, Andy is backed by the others, and eventually he accepts the role. Lindsay's voice echoes through my mind, and I grit my teeth. I'll do it for you. This world was never fit for your kindness. I'm gonna make it a better place. I am a spark, I say, turning to Jake. I'm in. I'm all in. We're gonna do this. I catch another glance at the sphere in Sarah's hands. The flashing hasn't slowed down any, but it hasn't gotten any faster. It looks at me, ominously, but I force my head away. I face the island where the Statue of Liberty once stood, and I look at the debris all around me, broken chunks of the effigy that had sunken themselves into the land. My first order of business, I say, lifting the pieces into the air. It's gotten so much easier to visualize the pieces as they once were, and at once they were formed to replace the statue that once was. The sword it once carried stuck for good inside the Acheron. Is to fix this symbol as a piece of unity, not war. Not war. Not yet. Sarah reflects on the surreal fact that Andy is set to become their new president, though she knows it'll take time for others to see him as he do. As the group prepares to leave their location, on foot since their van is destroyed, Sarah carries the sphere that once held John's essence. Despite its potential, she finds comfort in its presence, feeling it as a lingering gift from him. Sarah experiences a flash of a feeling of John in a forest waiting for her. She lives a final moment between them, then wakes, is overtaken by grief, and then is reassured by Iris' comfort. As the group jokes and plans their next steps, including finding new transportation, Sarah feels hope growing. With Andy's leadership and everyone united, they're ready to begin to rebuild the country. As they set off, she sees the sunrise and feels the significance of a new beginning, of a new dawn for them all.
Reverie Syndrome. Time Untold. Bone Casket. A clawed hand, grotesquely elongated with talons sharp and glistening like obsidian shards, closed around the first throat with a crushing grip. The talons dug into his flesh, the skin beneath them turning a sickly shade of purple as the hand tightened. There was a chilling, crunching sound as the bones of the first neck buckled under the immense pressure, a sharp, brittle snap that echoed like a deathly crack in the silent chamber. The sound was visceral and jarring, cutting through the air with a dreadful clarity. From the rift, a gaping, jagged Terran reality that pulsed with the erratic, ghostly light, emerged a towering, nightmarish figure. The rift itself seemed to writhe and shimmer, its edges flickering with an unnatural luminosity that distorted the space around it. As the beast emerged fully into the room, its massive form loomed over the surroundings, casting long, ominous shadows. The beast was an imposing spectacle, a grotesque amalgamation of primal power and darkness. Its hide was a mottled patchwork of sickly greens and bruised purples, marked by myriads of scars, deep, jagged lacerations that twisted around puckered wounds that marred its body. Each scar seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as if the beast carried the very essence of its past battles within its flesh. Golden eyes shone radiantly. The first can offer no sound as their head goes limp in the beast's grip. The simple exhale of victory over its prey is enough to communicate the effortlessness of its kill. The beast's cackle erupted from its throat, a grotesque sound that reverberated through the chamber with a malevolent resonance. The noise seemed to grow in intensity, filling the room with an unsettling, manic energy. The beast held the first lifeless body aloft, its clawed grip turning the corpse into a grisly trophy. The bloodied remains dangled helplessly, casting long, macabre shadows against its cold walls. As the cackling subsided, a disturbing transformation began to unfold. The beast's massive form, previously so solid and imposing, started to convulse and shimmer. It was as though an unseen force were working beneath the surface of its flesh, causing its entire figure to writhe and undulate. The beast's hide began to ripple and shift. The motion was reminiscent of steam escaping from a boiling pot. A multitude of mouths began to manifest across the beast's body. These new mouths emerged with a grotesque, almost organic fluidity, their appearance seemingly random and chaotic. They stretched open with jagged, yawning gapes that marred the beast's hide, revealing rows of teeth that glistened with a sickly, spectral sheen. The mouths varied in size and shape. Some were wide and circular, others narrow and gaping like the maws of a predatory fish. They seemed to pulse with an unnatural life of their own, as though they were hungry for something beyond mere flesh. The beast's transformation was mesmerizing in its horror. The shifting of its form was accompanied by a dark, almost ephemeral mist that seemed to seep from the newly formed mouths, swirling and coiling around the beast's figure like a living shadow. "Oh, I should have known that this was an omen," the second says, their arms falling to their sides. There was a level of hopelessness facing down a monster as they had now. The beast brings the first's body up closer to its chest, and the now ravenous mouths begin ripping into their flesh. 2, then 5, then 10 sets of immaterial teeth rend and separate blood from bone. The gory affair sprays the perfectly painted room, a deep rose red.
I must find the rest.
The beast attempts to say. Darkness was clouding its vision, but suddenly its eyes fill into a crimson sort of color as it begins heaving.
There is more here.
With a deliberate, almost causal movement, the beast turned its attention away from the gruesome feast and fixed its gaze upon the cadaver lying on the table. The shift in focus was sudden and unsettling, as if the beast's monstrous appetite had been momentarily sated by its grisly meal. The second, paralyzed with fear and desperation, was left forgotten in the shadows. Of course, it was the source of all this trouble in the end, wasn't it? The cadaver on the table lay in stark contrast to the carnage that had just transpired. It was a lifeless, pallid form, its features obscured by the dim light that flickered uncertainly from the nearby torches. The table itself was an ancient wooden slab, scarred and stained from previous unknown rituals. Its surface was grimy and uneven, the edges chipped and worn, as though it had borne witness to countless dark affairs. The beast's eyes, now the deep, foreboding crimson, narrowed with a malevolent understanding. The gaze was intense, almost reverent, as it regarded the cadaver with a sense of grim recognition.
Reverie.
It tossed the remnants of the first's body against the wall, which landed with a sloshy sound, and the wall was painted with the unconsumed blood. The beast had taken a step closer. It gazed fixedly at the body lying on the table, and the second spared no time to dive under the nearby table, shaking visibly from the event. Reverie. He called himself Micah now, a name forged from his aspirations and the persona he had crafted for himself. But before this new identity, he was born into the world as Gavin Daniels. That name, once his true, now felt like a distant echo, a remnant of a life he'd long abandoned. Micah had ventured far beyond the confines of his original time, a place he had left behind in pursuit of an escape so total it bordered on transcendence. In his quest for liberation, Micah had finally achieved what he had sought, a complete and total escape. The weight of his past was now a mere shadow, an afterthought compared to the grandeur of his new identity. And yet, there was a final, satisfying act that punctuated his escape, the consumption of the worthless copy that had dared to oppose him. It was a symbolic and literal act of triumph, absorbing the duplicate that had threatened his newly carved path, obliterating any remnant of challenge that stood in his way. Within the deep recesses of his being, there was an insidious fire that had burned ever since the news reached him. The runt of his original timeline had managed to escape the clutches of Jack and Data. This was a timeline now relegated to the doomed space, where the remnants of humanity were destined to wither away in their inevitable heat death. A universe where existence itself had been spiraling towards an unavoidable end. The fire within him was more than just anger. It was a raw, gnawing force that clawed at his insides, fueled by the remnants of unresolved fury and the affront of the past nemesis that refused to be extinguished. In rare, fleeting moments, pangs of memory surfaced, dragging with them a visceral recollection of his past struggles. He remembered a moment of bitter confrontation, a time when he and Gavin, two facets of the same existence, clashed. The memory was both haunting and familiar, a reminder of the inevitable convergence of their paths. There was an unsettling sense of inevitability about that memory, as if it were an intrinsic part of their fates, a grim dance destined to repeat across eons. Yet Micah knew deep down that this was not the ultimate truth of existence. He had won over that version of himself, emerging not just as a survivor, but as a victor who had transcended his former limitations. He claimed not only victory, but also absorbed the full spectrum of his other self's power. The culmination of this duality had granted him unparalleled strength, an assimilation of capabilities that surpassed the sum of its parts. Micah's new self was not just an evolution, but a complete reclamation of power and identity, having eradicated the version of himself that once threatened this ascent. And yet, that wasn't all. There was something more, an undercurrent of unease that had been present ever before he consumed Gavin. Ever since that fateful moment, Micah had been plagued by an incessant ringing sound. It was a discordant noise. The sound was not merely a sensation, but a persistent, invasive presence, a call from obscure and forgotten corner of existence. The ringing was not just auditory, but a primal, guttural scream that echoed through the fabric of time itself. It was as though some ancient cosmic space was reaching out to him, its voice a desperate, insistent plea. This cry from the void was relentless, imploring him to arrive, to gather and reassemble what had been scattered. It urged him to correct and fix what was broken, but also to shatter and destroy that which was whole. The call was maddening in its intensity, a cacophony that seemed to tear at the edges of his sanity. The sound was a siren's call to chaos, urging him to relinquish his grip on reason and succumb to a primal urge to rip and tear everything around him. It was a seductive madness that beckoned him to embrace his darkest impulses, to unleash a torrent of destruction without restraint. But who would he become if he yielded fully to this insistent call? Micah was acutely aware of the abyss that lay at the heart of such surrender. He had known the depths of despair and isolation, A lifetime spent in solitude had made him intimately familiar with the voices that whispered from the edges of sanity, urging him toward ruin. The remnants of those experiences had taught him a painful but necessary lesson in restraint. Yet now, standing on the precipice of a new reality, Micah began to see the exhilarating freedom that came with embracing chaos. There was a unique and intoxicating thrill in actively pursuing the infinite destruction of everything around him. It was a liberation from the weight of his past, a sweet release from the accumulated burdens of his existence. The prospect of letting go, of immersing himself in boundless, unrestrained frenzy was intoxicating. It felt good to kill. It felt like he was able to exert a depth of feeling he knew nothing of. Discovery, in a life as long as his, discovery was something new. It was in the corpse that sat in front of him that discovery was now possible. A being of utter darkness, of regret. The virality of that feeling was obsessive. It felt the sounds panging behind his eyeballs when he was staring at it. I regret everything. I regret you. I regret me. I will regret until I can no longer. It was a virus. It was the virus. The virus that had kept humanity back from achieving everything it ever wanted. It was at times a man, at times the man he had been looking for, back when he was just a boy. But now, even though that boy was dead, here was that man. Thagirian, he who wears his victims. Cowman Serrano. Kane Gray. Simon Nagatomi. And not just them. So many people taken in by regret. Many people who wished nothing more than to be more than what this world allowed them to be. Many who screamed at the top of their lungs, yet still found themselves reduced to less than ash. I will be your reverie, your ultimate desire made manifest. I am become infinite. He bent down. His skin started to warp as it connected to the corpses. The flailing darkness swirled and deposited frozen infinity into his body. He opened his mouth as the crimson sin filled his vision, as the memory of every forgotten man, woman, and child split his sense of self into the thousands. Each moment he stood in the bone casket, a land he knew nothing of, was 10,000 years of lives the virus had claimed. He was split in twain as his brain worked to sync with the new information that was pooling in his body as it made the new connections. All the while, the strange figure, the more terrified of the two figures he had seen in this strange land, had chosen to hide themselves underneath a desk. The terror he had inflicted would probably be more efficient if left to live and reminisce. And so he left the figure as he cocked his head upward, immediately appearing on the surface of the bone casket. At least out there, he'd be able to understand more about this strange new world. He appeared on a rocky landscape, stone statues carved intricately into the shape of people as they reached toward the sky. No, that wasn't quite right. They weren't stone statues, but instead made of bone fragments. This was the bone casket, a hidden name for the moon of this land, known only to the most trusted with the secret. This world was strange. It split itself in two, though not by variance of timeline as his world had been. This world was split down the middle, and both coexisted as an upworld and an underworld, and he was currently at the intersection point between the two, the bone casket. There were no alternate timelines here, even his own actions rewriting the past. They've not created an alternate path, even though memories of that olden life resided deep within his brain. They were overwritten. He knew it as it was new, all right. Long past were the days where someone known as Gavin Daniels was born to die. Then again, it wasn't here, but he did sense that some form of his other self, that pathetic ingrate, was here in this new world too, and he had come into some sort of power. He would have to look closer into this. Maybe it was similar to how that boy, John, had made it through to this new world, although he was a problem no longer. Instead, he was the solution. Something in that boy's memories told him that it was his action that changed destiny, emancipated Micah from his fate, and falling victim to his own regret left him alone in charge to claim the power. And suddenly the memories of them flooded into his eyes, those the man had met when he stepped away from his mission. He recognized familiar voices, and then their faces and names came to him. Rodid, Tiki, Cedric X, Lachis, Osteria, Michael, Drew, Sepher. Rodid, Tiki, Cedric X, Lachis, Osteria, Michael, Drew, Sepher, Rodid, Tiki, Cedric X, Lachis, Osteria, Michael, Drew, Sepher. The names were flying through his mind at a rapid pace. He then knew what he must do. He looked down instantly and was within the bone casket once more. Staring up at him was the figure from before who had taken to hiding.
This place. People from the upworld travel here. Is there a way back?
The figure was stunned at his reappearance, mouth agape, and suddenly he knew that additional motivation to answer was needed. Micah Reverie reached out an arm and took hold of the figure's forearm. A sudden chill had bruised their arm almost instantly, and they let out a sound of pain. Yes, but we're not supposed to facilitate that way. We're only meant to send them down, those that come here.
You're going to do it now,
Micah Reverie said. The tone in his voice was perfectly neutral. It wasn't a demand. It was just a fact of life. The figure nodded their head and rubbed their arm reflexively when he let go.
Send me upward. Inflict me upon those who I remember. And never, ever feel safe again.
The figure's eyes were wide, but ultimately accepting.
I am your reverie.
The first place he visited wasn't a surprise. He knew it as soon as the thought entered his brain.
The artist. It was he who created the image of the virus. He who gave form to the idea.
His eyes opened, and suddenly, intentionally, he was there. It was effortless. He hadn't been hiding in the slightest. Nor was his location anywhere close to a problem to reach like the bone casket had been. And even then, with his latent powers, even that had been no struggle.
Hello, Rodid.
The fuck are you doing here?
I'm here because you visualized me, or at least the version of the virus before. Complicated, I know, but I know you're following along. I'm here to give you a choice. Submit to your regret and join the collective. Or die.
That's crazy talk. Get out of here with that. You're nothing but a big old faker.
Faker. I'll make you eat those words.
I've heard better comebacks from a Marvel movie.
I do so hate wasting time. Let's just get this over with.
Oh God! Oh God, help me! Oh God! Help! Help!
On Sunday, March 18th, 2029, Sarah recounts a long day of travel. After recovering a minivan from a blocked parking garage using Iris' ladder and Jake's hot wiring skills, the group hits the road. Exhausted, Sarah falls asleep in the back seat and dreams vividly of a peaceful field, where she sees John and Jay underneath an oak tree. In the dream, John is dressed for a formal occasion, and the two reunite joyfully. He invites Sarah to dance amongst floating flowers, and they share a heartfelt moment together. Sarah questions whether the dream is real, but John reassures her that the connection transcends dreams, that it's as real as she believes it to be. They kiss, and she silently expresses her love for him. So, that was a lot, and some weird stuff happened along the way. I'm not sure what that was all about. Yeah, that's it for Dreamer, and if you like this, definitely let me know your thoughts, because I've obviously been working a very long time on these stories. Up next, we're going to be talking about the epilogue story to Dreamer. This was the last story that was chronologically released in the Radical-9 saga, and we've talked about quite a bit of it already, but A New Dawn, a Dreamer epilogue, is coming next. Check you guys next time.